The movie begins by introducing us to Jonathan Schell, a Vietnam War veteran and now a mercenary who has just lost 3 companions in an operation in Cuba. To make matters worse, the U.S. government denied any involvement in the attack and ignored the mercenaries, who are now unemployed. We move on to Miami, to the violent Columbus High School, where a couple of Latino kids are beating up an African American. Professor Durrell and Professor Jane stop the altercation, which apparently was caused by the student Juan Lacasse, leader of the Reyes de la Destrucción, RDD gang. Jane confronts Juan, but he not only denies being responsible, he also threatens her. Consequently, the teacher asks Principal Claude to expel him for the safety of the school, though the man rejects the idea for lack of proof. At the end of the day, Jane is harassed by Juan's gang, and he promises to pay her a personal visit. The woman returns to her apartment, frightened, but brightens up the moment she is reunited with her boyfriend, Schell, who tells her he was forced to retire and is now looking for new work as a mercenary. Schell goes to see Attorney Wilson, who wants him to get rid of anyone who stands in the way of his drug shipments. The moment he hears that, the protagonist grabs him by the throat, reminding him that he is a soldier, not a criminal. A little later, Jane is out jogging near the beach as usual, when suddenly a huge man intercepts her, striking her leg with a rod. Luckily, Schell appears and prevents him from landing a second blow on his girlfriend. Schell does what he can to stand up to the big guy, but is no match. The thug flees as soon as he hears police sirens. In the hospital, Jane copes with her broken leg and is certain that Juan sent the thug, but she does not want Schell to get involved for his own safety. She orders him to call a teacher who can replace her at school, but instead Schell contacts a colleague who gives him an authentic teaching certificate under the name James Smith. Thus, the man shows up at Columbus High School as Jane's substitute, although his real goal is to track down the thugs who harassed her. The classroom is chaotic. Students are dancing, stealing things, even sleeping. Naturally, they do not take Schell seriously when he goes to the board. They laugh at him and throw paper balls at him. While taking attendance, he particularly notices Juan. Later in another room, Schell meets Durrell and Johanna the librarian, who give him information about Jane's attackers, not knowing she is his girlfriend. In the conversation, he overhears that Juan is the leader of RDD, but that Claude has refused to punish him for lack of concrete evidence, an attitude he's held since his days in the police. So Schell visits the principal's office to get Juan's file, but substitute teachers do not have access to such requests. While chatting with Claude, he notices the man's expensive watch. Claude, in turn, notices Schell's war wounds. Later, the protagonist reunites with his old buddies Joe, Rem, Wellman, and Holland, asking them for help dealing with the school gang. Although there is no guaranteed pay, Schell mentions that drugs are being sold there, and where there are drugs, there is money. The next day, the mercenaries infiltrate the school as simple workers. This time, Schell goes into Vietnam mode by putting a painful hold on Ty, the student who keeps throwing paper at him. And the punishments do not stop there. Shelley almost breaks the hand of student Rodriguez to make him hand over a sharp object. With that, the substitute makes it clear who is in charge. Afterwards, Ty and Rodriguez head to the nurse's office, where the principal learns of their injuries. Claude immediately goes to Shelley's classroom to fire him, but stops when he sees that the students are interested in the lesson on Vietnam the substitute is giving. This helps them connect more with their teacher. Just as he was hurt and lost friends in the war, these kids have suffered on the streets. At the end of class, Schell watches the work his comrades have done, installing security cameras throughout the building. He then runs into the principal, who only warns him that he cannot punish students like that again. Meanwhile, Jane is finally able to return to her apartment, though she still has her leg in a cast. However, she is very worried by what she has heard about her substitute. If only she knew who it really is. In the next class, since Juan arrives late, Schell makes him write "I'm sorry" 100 times on the board. While the delinquent is writing, Schell explains to the students the origins of various well-known gangs in the country. They all have one thing in common: members end up killed or jailed. This is why these young people should focus on their studies. Even if they think being in a gang is cool, they start to believe Schell's words. After class, the principal approaches Schell to invite him to his office. But soon after, Schell sees on the security cameras that he is speaking privately with Juan. They are plotting something. Thanks to that, the protagonist prepares for potential problems by putting on a bulletproof vest and taking his pistol. When he tries to leave the school, he sees that Juan and his gang are waiting for him. He goes back inside to hide in the library, where the gang members enter with the help of security guards sent by Claude. However, Shell surprises one guard from behind and makes them all hand over their weapons. Then he has some fun throwing books at them, after which he hides again among the shelves. Once more, the substitute takes them by surprise, throwing several enemies through a window. One of the remaining gang members takes advantage of the moment to retrieve his weapon and shoot Shell, believing him dead. Protected by his vest, Shell gets back up and pushes him out the window, while Juan runs off in terror. Meanwhile, Darrell visits Jane to check on her recovery, but is shocked to see a photo of her boyfriend, Shell, whom he knows as Professor Smith. When the protagonist gets home, Jane confronts him for lying to her all this time. After the scolding, Shell tells her about the school's delinquency, enabled by the principal. That evening, after spending the day keeping an eye on Juan, Hoyle, another of Shell's mercenary friends, follows the trail of the big guy who attacked Jane, named Bull. When Shell catches up with Hoyle, both men witness a drug deal set up by Bull, who turns out to be one of Juan's traffickers. Moments later, they stop Bull while Hoyle takes care of the drug buyers. The substitute intended to take the briefcase of money, but suddenly Holland, the only mercenary who had refused to help, shows up. Holland grabs the briefcase and disarms Shell, allowing Bull to beat him. Though he takes a few good punches, Shell manages to come out on top. He is about to turn on Holland, but Holland ends up whacking Bull, who was about to strike Shell with a rock. Guess they are even now. The next day, Claude receives a call from Johnny, a drug kingpin who wants his money back after last night's botched deal. Why is he asking Claude? Simple. The principal has been working with Juan to set up a drug trafficking network in Miami on Johnny's orders. At school, Claude blames Juan, but the latter had nothing to do with the massacre. Just then, Shell's voice is heard over the loudspeakers announcing that they have received musical instruments, sports equipment, books, and other items as donations. In reality, this was a small investment that the mercenaries made with the money from the raid. For this reason, Shell wins the admiration of the students, who see him as a hero, though it is for that very reason that Claude deduces who stole Johnny's money. That night, after Shell stays late for a parents' meeting, he heads to his apartment, but is ambushed by hitmen sent by Claude. Could this be the end of our super professor? Meanwhile, one student also stayed at school until late. When he tries to leave, he finds the doors blocked. He heads to the basement emergency exit, but stumbles upon a shocking scene. Claude and Juan hiding packets of cocaine in a school bus. While trying to run away, he finds a hiding spot for Lisa, making it clear she must tell the substitute everything once she escapes. He then tries to get away another way, but is intercepted in the gym by Claude, who mocks his innocence and executes him with a pistol. The next day, the school is downcast over the deaths of both teachers, yet Shell appears as if nothing happened. After finding out that Claude was going to meet with Wilson, Shell gets there first to talk to the lawyer, who tries to flee as soon as he sees him. Of course, he does not get far before Shell catches him, forcing him to confess that from the start, Johnny wanted to hire mercenaries to protect his synagogue shipments, which Claude and the Reyes de la Destrucción distribute. Lisa, for her part, visits Jane along with Jerome, Professor Smith's favorite student, only to find their teacher has been kidnapped by Juan and his men. The gang uses Jane to summon the substitute. He is suspicious of how sudden the call is, so after prepping himself, Shell shows up at the apartment with a gift box concealing his pistol. He shoots one thug, but the others quickly overpower him on the floor. Minutes later, Jane answers the door for a worried neighbor, and Shell takes advantage of the distraction to free himself, using one delinquent as a shield and firing his pistol at the rest. However, Juan forces him to drop his weapon by threatening Jane. When Juan is about to execute Shell, Shell grabs a gun off the floor and kills the gang member. Finally, Lisa can reveal to the mercenary the operation Claude has beneath the school and how Darrell sacrificed himself to protect her. Once Jane is relocated to a safe place, Shell and his team head to the high school to seize the drugs. Of course, Claude and Johnny's criminals show up right away. Initially, they try to negotiate with Shell, but he spots an enemy sniper targeting him, triggering a shootout. It turns out Johnny's men are not just common thugs, but professional mercenaries led by Llanos. Little by little, they corner Shell's group, though Shell's team also has their own firepower. While more mercenaries approach the basement, Holland greets them with a hail of bullets. Unfortunately, the first casualty is Wellman, who falls at Llanos' hands. Then Llanos moves on to Shell's classroom, where the teacher is waiting for him, thanks to the security cameras. Shell tries to get him to surrender peacefully, but at the slightest move, he is forced to take Llanos out. At the same time, on the rooftop, Rem is hit by enemy gunfire, or so they think. Holland is downstairs mocking Johnny, whom he has tied up, but Claude shoots Holland in the back. Before entering, Shell cuts the power, taking advantage of the darkness to disarm Claude and Johnny. However, the principal surprises him by throwing a cloud of cocaine in his face, while Johnny shoots him in the side. Fortunately, a dying Holland shoots Johnny before succumbing to his own wounds. Jane laments the death of her friend, but still has to catch Claude, who tries to hide in the hallways. Claude surprises Shell, attacking him with a fire extinguisher, but Shell manages to shove him into a glass panel. Claude takes advantage of this, wounding him with a shard of glass and grabbing his pistol. Furious, the criminal asks who Shell is working for. Shell replies that he works for himself. There are some things you can only teach through violence. He then twists Claude's arm, completely subduing him. Exiting the building, the protagonist reunites with Joe, his only remaining comrade. Together, they leave the place, searching for a new destination, preferably another corrupt school to take down.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.